You've been promoted to lead your team of former peers, and you want to know how can you go about establishing boundaries with them so that you can maintain the existing relationships, work well with them professionally, and ensure that they respect you as a leader. Well, that's the question that we're going to answer in this video. Let's get started. I'm going to share with you 8 ways in which you can establish boundaries as a new leader. 1. You start establishing boundaries by understanding and framing your role as their leader. And when you can do that, then you will start to naturally establish boundaries with your team. As their leader, your job is to bring your team to success. And that means that when it comes to work, work comes first, and that everyone in your team needs to understand that. You are leading for the good of your team and also for your business. When you shift your mindset towards that understanding, your relationships and the boundaries that you will eventually establish will shift accordingly. Naturally, as their leader, you need to get to know your team well. And this is where you need to exercise compassion, empathy, and even sympathy in developing the relationships with them. That's it. Being their leader doesn't necessarily need you to be their personal friend, although you need to know them well enough to help them overcome their challenges in their road to success. While you yourself are wondering how are you going to go about being their leader when you used to be a former peer and you were more friends, know that your team is looking and are wondering the same, and they're looking to you for guidance on how to establish that new relationship. As their leader, you will seek their inputs. However, your team will expect you to make the final decisions. And as long as your decisions are for the good of the team and for the good of the business, your team will come to respect and accept that. And if any of them take your decisions and how you lead in a negative way, then they're not making the effort to understand the situation that you are now in. And then perhaps they're not really your friends after all. As the leader of the team, you can now lead your team in many different ways. As a peer, you may have been used to following others. But now as a leader, you need to challenge, support, encourage your team on their road to success. Sometimes this might mean leading from the front. Other times it could be guiding your team from the side. And there may be occasions where you are best playing the role of a leader by supporting your team from the back. And when you are leading in these different ways with consistency, over time you naturally establish the boundary of how you lead with your team. When you are a peer, you will probably more likely be willing to share information about yourself in order to be liked, in order to get along with your peers, or even to show that you have access to certain privileged information. That changes when you become a leader. Some new leaders make the mistake of sharing too much in wanting to be liked, or in order to show that they have access to certain information. But actually now as a leader, you need to be able to show that you can exercise confidentiality when it comes to certain information. You see, your team has certain expectations when it comes to you being a leader or anyone being in that leadership position. They don't expect someone perfect, but they do expect someone who is capable and also someone who is loyal to the team. And this loyalty can be in terms of the access to information and also the willingness to maintain the privacy and the confidentiality of that information. Your team wants to know that you are always there looking out for their best interests. And so if you share too much information, your team starts to wonder if you have what it takes to actually maintain confidentiality and to keep things together. On the other hand, if you share too little information about yourself, then your team doesn't get a sense of who you are as a person, and it makes it harder for them to work with you. One of the best ways to establish boundaries and the consequences for meeting them or not meeting them is for you to lead by example. You want people to respect you because you are able to lead them to achieve results. You want them to respect you because you can accomplish things. And that means you need to be able to work just as hard or even harder than your team in order to deliver results and in order to ensure that you are bringing them to success. When your team sees that you are upholding a professional standard, then it gives you the moral authority to expect them to do the same. Of course, in some cases, you do need to verbally communicate what are some of these standards or boundaries that you have set, such as expected work hours or the desired results that need to be delivered. In this way, they know that anything less from them would have crossed a boundary. Now, of course, boundaries themselves are meaningless unless you are willing to enforce them. And this is where you got to have both positive and negative consequences. When someone meets the standards or expectation or is within boundaries, you enforce with positive consequences. And when someone in your team crosses the line or fails to meet the expectations or crosses the boundary, then this is where you need to respond with a negative consequence. When you appear in your team, being likable is actually helpful to you because it allows you to get along with your team members. But now, as their leader, being likable as a leader could actually harm your leadership. If you feel the need to be liked as a leader, then what you're doing is allowing your actions and decisions and your words to be influenced by the friendships that you have. You have to understand that as the leader, you need to do what is right and what is best for the business and for the team. And that means that there will be times when you will have team members who may not necessarily fully agree with the actions or decisions that you have taken. Therefore, in some way, you actually do need to be at arm's length when it comes to your relationships with the team. You got to be close enough with them so that you can understand their struggles and be there to help them to their success. At the same time, you need to have enough distance so that you can make the best decisions for your business and for your team without being influenced by the relationships that you have with your team members. Naturally, it is important that you keep in mind that what is arm's length for one team member may not be the same for another team member. Every team member is unique. So you have to figure out how much of a relationship you can develop with one team member without feeling that you may be influenced by that relationship in your decision making. One rule of thumb that I've come across is simply this. You can be friendly at work, but it doesn't mean that you have to be friends outside of work. If you use that as a general rule of thumb to guide you as to what is arm's length, that is usually about right. As a leader, your team needs to respect you and see that you are doing your job in bringing them to their success. That is the number one priority. The relationship that you have with your team, while still important, is actually a lower priority because of that. If you enjoyed this video so far, really appreciate if you give me the thumbs up. It helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you have yet to subscribe to First Time Leadership, do click on that subscribe button to be notified of when new videos come out to help you with your leadership journey. And lastly, if you have any comments about what I've shared in this video, do share a comment below.